Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here as always, and we got a lot to get to tonight, including JJ McCarthy, a hand injury. Kevin O'Connell talked about play calling and your questions and comments. There's a lot of room tonight on the show to answer questions and thoughts and feelings and takes. So make sure you fire those into the comment section. We'll get to them shortly after I give you a little bit of a taste of what happened out at TCO Performance Center today. The injury report, the Chicago Bears could not have been any more different than the Baltimore Ravens. If you remember last week, the Ravens had nothing at all on their injury report, while the Chicago Bears had half of their roster. So it's hard to parse through a little bit what was happening exactly with Chicago and their practice. I think the next couple days we'll get a sense for who is actually likely to be on the injury report and playing, and which players matter, and which we're having maybe recovery days on Wednesday, because it was a very long list. For the Vikings, though, at the top of their injury list was JJ McCarthy, who hit his hand on a helmet when throwing to Justin Jefferson. I believe it was the one that it was in the end zone, and Jefferson did not make the catch, but it also could have been a different play. That was what some people brought up. But either way, he hit his hand on a helmet, and obviously not a great feeling for him, I'm sure. So Kevin O'Connell came out today, announced that. I think just to let everybody know, yep, he's going to be limited in practice, but it did not sound from either what O'Connell said or JJ McCarthy about the hand injury like there's any chance whatsoever that he is going to miss this game against the Chicago Bears. So, well, let's just start there with what JJ had to say about his hand injury.
Did you think that affected you at all after that?
Well, if you get your hand slammed in a car door, it's going to feel different for, everything you do with that hand. So, there's no excuses whatsoever at the end of the day. We're warriors and we got to push through.
Just to be super clear, do you anticipate this changing anything about how you prep for this game or how you play?
No, sir.
Okay.
So there you go. JJ McCarthy says the injury should not change anything about his preparation or what happens for him leading up to the game against the Chicago Bears. I think maybe the best takeaway is that as we were evaluating some of those throws that were not in the vicinity of some of his receivers, it is possible that a hand injury may have impacted some of the accuracy there. I mean, these things happen. Guys get hit in the hand. Quarterbacks, all the time on their follow through or something, hit it off a helmet, hit it off, somebody else trying to go tackle them, and you have to power through and you have to make accurate throws. And I think that's what he's saying there either way. But I think that it is fair to look at it like there may have been some. I'm not saying that all accuracy issues from JJ McCarthy can be explained by this one injury. We don't really know. We can't really tell without us going through the tape with him and saying, well, yeah, this one came out of my hand a little bit differently, but I think probably does explain some that were a little confusing, possibly, where he had open receivers, and even normally, whether it's training camp or what we've seen so far, he has been accurate, and on some of those, the ball came out differently. Again, that doesn't absolve everything, the technical issues and, some of the footwork that we saw, some of the late decisions, that has nothing to do with your hand, but it could have been somewhat of a factor there, and it will be something to watch for this week about where he gets to with the hand and if he is practicing in full. Again, when he says that it won't affect anything about how he prepares for this game, he was already limited in practice, so it had at least some effect. And while we were out there, he was not throwing at all. In fact, he was kind of tossing the ball around with a left hand. And then, we as a media walk out there for 15, 20 minutes, and then we go back inside once they start the real practicing. So we get to see the warm-ups, who's warming up. And during that time, we did not see JJ McCarthy throwing a football. I will say that I could just hear the collective groan of the state of Minnesota when it's like, yeah, oh, one more thing to add, JJ McCarthy. You're like, what? what is it going to be? It has, a hand injury. And it is unfortunate for him that he has to deal with something else here, and said they're working through it and getting treatment. And it didn't sound in any way from what Kevin O'Connell said like they expect it to be problematic. I also think that when it comes to nicks and cuts like this, they are a product of playing the quarterback position. It's not uncommon really at all for a quarterback to have a swollen hand or an injured hand, or get your hand slammed in a car door during an NFL game. And that's how it goes. Anybody who watched the documentary with Kirk Cousins, the quarterback documentary, he had a good season in 2022, but I think you realized just how much physical punishment he had taken throughout that year, including, getting hit in the ribs against Washington, and how that had to be something he dealt with for really the rest of the year. Again, that's the quarterback position. You take a lot of hits. It's dangerous out there. That's life. But as long as it's not going to impact his game status for Chicago, then we all move forward. But that is at the top of the list for things to watch. Does he practice in full this week, or does he continue to be limited by the hand injury? Because if he is limited by it tomorrow, Friday, well, then you might start to go, is it going to be okay for him to play? But at least the tenor of the way that he talked about it and the way that Kevin O'Connell talked about it doesn't seem like you have to turn your panic meter up very high. And when it comes to any quarterback in the league, because I know where this heads when there's a JJ McCarthy anything, where it heads is injury prone. And if you guys have watched or listened to the show for a long time, you know how much I hate that. I'm just not a fan at all of calling players injury prone. A lot of times injuries are just a product of bad breaks, bad luck. Somebody falls on your leg or they don't. And one of my favorite examples was Kyle Rudolph, who got injured early in his season, in his career, got called injury prone, then played like 100 straight games. And it just, like, that's how it goes. So I don't like when I see that. I mean, come on, we're talking about a guy hitting his hand on a helmet. This is something that every quarterback probably deals with at some point during a season. Does it impact him going forward? Does it look like it's impacting the way he's throwing the football? That would be the only part to talk about if we start to get a sense for those things, if there is more missed practice, and if it seems like he's struggling to grip the ball at all with the injury, but he did continue to play the whole rest of the football game with this injury, and sounds like he feels confident that it'll be okay going forward. So then we're going to treat it for right now like we're confident that it will be okay going forward, and we will adjust that if we have to. So other interesting things from JJ, his press conference, and Kevin O'Connell's, he was asked about staying calm late in the game. And I think that O'Connell more or less confirmed when we talked to him on Monday that he'd really like him in those situations to not press like they were in last week, where they're down 2 scores. And I think we all who have eyeballs saw that there might have been some pressing from McCarthy, some throwing the ball too hard and getting away from those techniques, and maybe trying too hard to make a play where he didn't necessarily have to and could have taken an easy route. And O'Connell talked about using checkdowns and things like that. Well, he was asked today about staying calm and not trying to get too far ahead of himself when he does get in those moments where he feels like he has to put the team on his shoulders.
Pressing in games when they start to slip away?
I wouldn't say pressing, but there is, a sense of, I'm a young player, and bad habits kind of show up in those moments where, you're trying to be the competitor and will yourself to a first down, will the team to a touchdown, all that stuff. And, it just all comes down to the basics and understanding in those moments. You have to have that, presence of mind to really focus on your breath. So just being able to really simplify things in those moments, calm your heart rate, and just, do the fundamentals.
I mean, to me, this discussion of what we saw from JJ McCarthy during that game, and some of the times where it felt like he was pressing, I think that is a product of just a lack of experience. And something I wrote about today I was just trying to think last night about quarterback whispering and all those types of things. The discussion of how much the coach and how much the system and how much is JJ McCarthy to blame for a game like that, and some of the early statistics that we're seeing and so forth. And, I kept thinking about just how inexperience plays into everything when it comes to a quarterback, when it comes to your timing, how you are seeing the game in general, like how you're reading the secondary, how you're dealing with the blitz, how you're giving the cadence and preparing in a game to give the cadence, all those things that go into a game in general. I mean, I think that every single one of them plays into having experience, where the more experience you have, the more times you've been out there. There's a reason why Joe Flacco is able to drop into a team and a week later throw the ball all over the yard, make the Cincinnati Bengals competitive and fun, where, Jake Browning, who hasn't played as much, wasn't able to do that. And I mean, you could say Flacco is more skilled, and he certainly is, but, I think that experience just plays so much into it. And I haven't seen too many quarterbacks that are 10-year veterans have 8 false starts. And I'm not saying it was all JJ McCarthy's fault, but, they talked about it in a way that, the quarterback needs to make sure everyone's on the same page there. And I think that's an inexperienced thing as well. But when we feel like we don't have time for inexperience, like this team was supposed to win, they are very good, they've got a lot of really good players, and the whole idea was that you could whisper JJ McCarthy into being a very good quarterback. And if you could get 75% of what Sam Darnold was last year with a better team and a better supporting cast and very, very good coaching, that you could be a really good competitive team and you can win and you can have a lot of success and you can smooth out those roller coaster moments. But I think what we are finding when it comes to quarterback whispering is that you can't whisper experience. You can't just coach in an empty facility during the bye week your way into, hey, all of a sudden now you know how to play this game. Right. And you've seen all the things that you've seen before, and you've been in and out of a huddle 10,000 times, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Like, you can only do those things by actually being out there. And that's what we're dealing with now and going through those roller coaster moments that ultimately with JJ McCarthy in the perfect world will play out much better for him in the future that he's been through them, but it's not easy to watch all the time, and it certainly isn't successful all the time. And so there's this conflicting things of he just needs experience. He just needs to go through them, and there's no secret, and there's no magic wand, and there's no method that you could just say, hey, we'll have him do this drill. We'll show him virtual reality. We'll have him out here studying defenses and helping the defensive staff when he's not playing. Or even for training camp, we'll have him do a joint practice. There's only so much you can do away from the actual situations in the actual field to make this work. So McCarthy needs to have games where he's down 2 scores in the fourth quarter and figures it out. And until he has enough of those games, there's going to be moments like there was against the Baltimore Ravens. And I think that that's the hard thing to accept, is that you just need to go through this because everybody wants their conclusion today. Everyone wants to know right now, today, at this moment, is JJ McCarthy freaking good or not? And I think that it takes a long time to really know that about an NFL quarterback. But I think that that's what everybody is constantly looking for, is the answer to whether he is going to be your future franchise quarterback or he's not going to be your future franchise quarterback. And I think it's hard to accept that he has to have these situations play out time and time and time again before you get those under your feet and into your brain of how different defenses play certain things and how the timing's got to work with certain stuff and how you calm yourself down in a spot where you're trying to go win the game for your team. So normally it's not, you just step into the NFL and you're able to do it. Sorry, I'm noticing that the video is a little bit on the glitchy side tonight. usually that doesn't happen. So I apologize for that if that's how it looks to you. I don't have a good answer for why that would be. So we'll just carry on as long as you guys can hear the show okay and everything. But usually we're pretty smooth here on the show. Not sure why that is. Anyway, so let's talk about a couple of things from the press conferences today. Kevin O'Connell, actually, it plays right into what I was just talking about with Kevin O'Connell. He was asked by Dane Mizutani whether it is harder than ever because of all of the outside analysis and the 24/7 breakdowns of the Minnesota Vikings from shows like this one and from the big head talking shows on TV and all that stuff. And the internet never seems to sleep when it comes to quarterback analysis. He was asked about how he views developing a quarterback in this environment.
My job is to, not only by myself, but in conjunction with our staff and JJ himself, just continuing to coach in a way where, no stone is unturned. We're recognizing everything, progress, areas of immediate improvement. And then most importantly, what I look for is the consistency of being able to put some routine things in that category of I can expect them every time. And it becomes second nature. And, sometimes when a guy's making his third or fourth start now or fifth start this week, it's a lot to ask in the midst of games, especially how they've kind of played out. But that doesn't change the fact that we're, in a business of, trying to go 1-0 this week. And JJ's going to have a great week of prep, and we'll continue to progress. And there's been a lot of encouraging things to go along with some things that, we can improve.
So there you go. I said improve on, if that was cut off right at the end. What Kevin O'Connell there is getting at is that he has to approach something like this on a day-to-day basis where he can't have the reactions that we have, that he has to continue to focus on the things that he knows need to be focused on. He has to focus on where JJ McCarthy can build on certain good elements of his performance. He has to focus on where he has to improve on things that go wrong and coach the micro details and also have a process for that. We use the word process way too freaking much, but also have a process for that of this is how we are going to do it to teach JJ McCarthy how to play quarterback in the NFL. And you can't waver from that because there's ups and downs. And you would think that, these guys over the years learn not to be prisoners of the moment, not to hear the outside noise. Oh, I promise you that they do, that JJ McCarthy is well aware of the things that are being said about him, and that Kevin O'Connell is well aware of the things that are being said as well about JJ McCarthy and their decision to move on from Sam Darnold and all that sort of stuff. But they have to continue to just focus on what they have to do to try to develop him. And I think that there's something we could take from that is just every single week, no matter how loud I say it, it's not, I know it's not going to stop the internet, just like I couldn't stop Justin Jefferson trade rumors a few years ago. So, but I'll say it anyway for everybody's benefit. We just don't have to do this thing where we decide that he is the next Tom Brady or he is the next Christian Ponder every single week. But you see it, and you see this battle of, now you got the people who are tweeting out, well, this is what Ponder did in his first 4 games. And now you got the people who are putting on social media, look at all these great throws. The media hates JJ. It's all nonsense. Okay. It's all nonsense. The truth is very boring here, which is through 4 games, we're nowhere close to conclusions, and we're all, including Kevin O'Connell, going to have to just go through this and see where we end up with at the end of the season. Someone asked me today about the benchmark for where we all got to be to decide whether it's JJ McCarthy's show going forward. And my answer to that is, if we all know it, then I think you're good. And if we don't all know it, then I think you need competition, or it's going to be unclear or whatever. But there's so much football left to be played. There's 8 more games of sample size to where in the best case scenario, assuming that he remains healthy the rest of the way, in the best case scenario, then we're going to be talking about a fairly big sample, not an entire season, unfortunately, but even if it is, would that be 12 games? A 12 game sample to know a lot more about where JJ McCarthy stands. And if there was ever a corner that was turned in terms of accuracy, control of the offense, connection with Justin Jefferson, this stuff's going to take time. So the best I could say is just, engaging in all of that doesn't do a whole lot of good for anybody. But certainly you can hear with Kevin O'Connell that he can't think about that too much himself. So anyway, there was another thing that got brought up maybe 1,005,000,000,000 times, which was Kevin O'Connell and his play calling after the game against the Ravens. So today, I believe it was Will Ragatz asked Kevin O'Connell about the play calling. He directed it more toward the 3rd and short, 4th and short stuff that we've talked about a lot, and we've gone over the numbers here on the show, but he kind of made it a little bit broader himself.
Play calling is something that, we put a lot of work in as a staff, and I put a lot of work into it. And it's a results-based thing, play to play, game to game, well aware of that. But that does not mean that I'm not always evaluating the best way to, play each and every snap, sequence of games, and ultimately what's best for this team this year. And I'm doing that, and I think you'll see some things reflected in that, but also the defense has a hand in it as well. And the last thing you want to do is just do it for the sake of doing it and then have it be not as productive as you would hope, just to get some things in a column somewhere, a statistical column.
I think that with Kevin O'Connell, and it all directs back to the run and pass ratio. And somebody said that the solar thing could impact what's the internet and how this is looking. So, okay. I mean, that's kind of crazy if that's the case. I do see on my thing so we're getting some dropped frames. So I apologize for that. But hopefully you all can, hear okay. And even if I'm a little glitchy, that we're doing just fine here. So anyway, with O'Connell and his answers to these questions over the years, which after every game, why aren't you guys grilling O'Connell about this, that, and the other thing? And I think one of the reasons that sometimes we don't ask the question is because we've asked it in the past and we've gotten the answer and we understand his philosophy. And when it doesn't work out, people want him, grilled, tarred and feathered, criticized, yelled at in a press conference. And it's often, for me at least, well, I've heard this answer. I know this answer. I know his philosophy. I don't know what more we're supposed to gain from this. And I think when you listen to him there's 2 takeaways. One is that O'Connell very much believes in, dictating what you're doing versus what the offense is trying to do to take things away from you. So if, the offense is trying to, do things X, Y, or Z against you, then what you're going to do is counter it with X, Y, or Z yourself. So if the defense has a particular personnel package where the Ravens are playing a lot of nickel, maybe you're thinking, all right, now we're going to handle it this way. Or if like the Lions, they got 3 linebackers, we're going to handle it that way. And a lot of that is built into the quarterback's play calls. So I think one of O'Connell's points was too that, some of these plays you guys are talking about that turn into passes may have been called runs and the quarterback checks out of it because the quarterback has control. So not every play call is just the play caller signaling in. It may have been the kill, and it's a run play, but kill to this. Kill just meaning like, forget that first play. We're actually going with the second play. Like that happens a lot too. So I think his point was that, like, look, we're going to look at what the defense is doing and we're going to call plays based on it. And they have people up in the booth. Ben Ellefson, former tight end of the Vikings. I interviewed him last year for a story, and Ben talked about charting defenses. So he's up there, he's watching the defense, everything that they do, he's writing down, and then he's on a headset and they're communicating that to the play caller as well. So play calling is not as simple as Madden, where a guy just stands there and looks through a playbook and goes, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pass. Like there's a little more going on there. And I think that's one of his points. Now, what I will say is that Kevin O'Connell's overall philosophy is to look for explosive plays with his offense. He fundamentally believes that if you get an explosive play, your chances of scoring shoot up huge versus if you're trying to have a 14-play drive and get a bunch of completions and a bunch of handoffs and stay on the field forever. He thinks that, and the statistics would back him up, that if you can hunt explosive plays and you can hit down the field and you can get 20 plus, your chances of scoring go up a lot. And especially now when every team starts at the 30 to 35 yard line, you are 1 or 2 plays away from getting in field goal position. I get that. And it's also always going to be a quarterback driven offense. Now, we could go back and forth all day about, well, hey, you know, you're playing a younger quarterback and you should run the ball more and your running game is working. And I agree with most of the things fundamentally that people are talking about, that like at their core of building the pass off the run means that you do run. And when you get a 12-yard run, this is something that was seared into my mind from probably John Madden and my dad watching football when I was young, was probably the idea that if someone's not stopping something, that you keep doing it, right? So if the opposing team is struggling to stop your run game and gives up a 12-yard carry to Jordan Mason, that you don't pass 4 straight times after that, make them show that they could stop it, right? And I think the Ravens had a few good run stops, but overall, it didn't really look like they were having a great time, and this season they haven't had a great time. So I do believe in that you sort of run until they stop you from running, or if you're hitting on short passes, then you keep going with that. But I also think that if this is going to work with JJ McCarthy, that he's going to have to be able to handle what Kevin O'Connell puts on his plate, because he is not going to change this. He is not halfway through a season, and probably not next year, say, you know what? I built this entire offense and it succeeded last year and it succeeded with Kirk Cousins, and Justin Jefferson put up historic numbers and all this stuff and was offensive player of the year in this offense. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear it all down and I'm going to start running 18 screens a game. It's just not going to happen. The other thing about the quick game that I should say is that they're averaging 3.5 yards per attempt with JJ McCarthy. When he throws it between 1 and 10 yards, just hasn't really been succeeding. So that's another part of it to mention as well. Now, yeah, you should have it be easy button stuff for him, but he also has to get to the easy button stuff, or has to know that it's there, because O'Connell builds in multiple things in any given play. So sometimes when you see a play called versus how it turns out and where he threw the football, you might say, well, why would you call a shot or a throw to there on this down? That might not be where it goes. But when it comes to the overall philosophy of the head coach, to be a pass-first coach, that's how it's going to be. And he came from a pass-first coach in Sean McVay, and they are passing their butts off in Los Angeles this year. And I think that they can do better things, and I think they can make some things easier for JJ McCarthy, but it's also the NFL, and the sink or swim method, I guess we're going to find out whether it works for him. But to me, just banging heads up against the wall constantly on play calling. I mean, it's such a complex thing that I get frustrated trying to talk about it and trying to break it down, because there's so many layers to it. But I think the bottom line for me is they're going to throw. They're never going to be a team that hands off 40 times and throws 16. They're always going to be on the side of pass, probably 60-40 type of area. And sometimes that's going to go wrong and it's going to frustrate you. And all other times it's going to go great and you're never going to bring it up. And that's just how football works, I guess. When the plays work, everyone's smart, and when they don't, they're not. And that is how it goes. So I think that you can have a very reasonable opinion about, leaning more heavily into the run and about how the development process goes in terms of what you put on his plate, but also This is an offense that was built for him as a quarterback. It's built for Jefferson to succeed, and it has had some success in the past. So it's going to be either a matter of JJ McCarthy gets it and locks into the timing and then it works, which is kind of what happened for Kirk Cousins in that first year. Early on, it was kind of messy in the first year of Kirk Cousins. His stats were not as good. And he would come to the podium after games and say, yeah, I don't really actually feel very good about this. And then eventually he got it. And he said, when was it? It was like the back end of the year in 2022. I think he finally said that he felt like he really was getting it. So it does take more than 4 games to entirely download into your brain the Kevin O'Connell offense, and we're going to see where this goes. And I want to see a bigger sample size myself to figure out where this has gone. So there it is. He was asked about the play calling. He gave you the answer about the play calling, and I think we just need to see a lot more of this before we decide, hey, he doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to developing JJ McCarthy. And also, the myth about quarterback whispering is that there's some sort of button to push at all times. And if the quarterback isn't playing well, it's always on, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you call that play? Why not this, that, and the other thing? But there's a lot of quarterbacks over the years who haven't had success. And not all of their coaches were total fools. It's going to be McCarthy, and he's got to develop himself too. He has to improve and build off of games like Baltimore. So there's kind of the rant over at purpleinsider.football. I wrote about this, so feel free to check that out. Let me give you the FanDuel question of the day, and then we can get to your questions and comments. It looks like I smoothed out, so looks like we're good now. Okay, so here is the FanDuel question of the day. JJ McCarthy's over-under for this game against Chicago on FanDuel is 214.5 yards. Give me one key to McCarthy bouncing back. That is the FanDuel question of the day. Your one and only key to McCarthy bouncing back. So, all right, let me get to your questions, comments, and thoughts. As I said, I've got plenty of time for thoughts tonight. I'm the open space. There's not a lot of other. I can go over the. Let me just look at the injury report real quick. Was there anything else notable? Ryan Kelly's window opened, 21-day window. O'Connell did mention that he's going to have a different helmet. He's going to have a Guardian cap. And all I can say is that Ryan Kelly, this is a decision that to come back or not, that I would just say, like, he's a grown man. He's been in the league for a long time. He can make this choice. He's not asking me for any help. I'm concerned about him and his future, and I have such deep respect for him as a player, but he's going to have to make this decision himself. Think long and hard. Just think long and hard, because yes, there are helmets. Yes, there are Guardian caps. There's no perfect method, especially when you have guys lining up, helmet to helmet right over top of you. So I guess that's all I would say. And they are proceeding with caution and bringing him back slowly, and they're going to evaluate it. And that's the best we could say about it. But it worries me. It does worry me with Ryan Kelly. So yeah, the injury report was kind of full of guys that were dealing with little things, but Josh Oliver being back out there is an important one for sure, that he's somebody who's been out for a little bit. And the fact that Christian Darrisaw practicing in full, that's something we're still keeping an eye on, but good news overall there. So I think that's really all that's notable for now, and then we'll see how it plays out through the rest of the week. All right, let's get to your comments. Zoomer KO says, what I like most about McCarthy is he seems to have a good feel and natural ability to protect himself, even as mobile and a running quarterback. What have you liked about McCarthy most so far? I tend to agree that he has a sense for when he's running in space, like it's time to get down. I think that the dive forward can be a little risky, because if you're diving forward, then guys diving at you, you're fair game if you're diving forward. If you're sliding, then they can't dive at you, although sometimes they do anyway. But for the rules, they're not supposed to. The dive forward can be a little bit on the risky side. As far as when pressure is coming, he hasn't been somebody that seems clueless about pressure. And I've always liked this about McCarthy, that I think he has a feel for what's going on in front of him. Now, pocket presence is a different story, because we saw in some moments where the pocket presence breaks down a little bit, where there's two steps up in the pocket, and that's how you hit somebody's helmet with your hand. That's how you get balls knocked down, where that needs to be one step up and then release the football as opposed to maybe multiple. And there's another play that gets knocked down where he or maybe tipped and goes out of the back of the end zone, where he's just sort of drifting a little bit and he drifts right into where the pressure is coming from. So pocket presence is something that has been hit or miss. There are other times I've thought it's fantastic. Protecting himself, though, I think he's done a good job of that. As far as what I like about JJ McCarthy the most, I mean, the tools for sure. The fact that he has a very strong arm, that your biggest issue is you're trying to harness having a strong arm. Well, that's better than trying to, take out a tire pump or something. And, if anyone's seen the episode of SpongeBob where he buys fake arms that look really strong, well, you can't do that in the NFL. You can't make a guy's arm a whole heck of a lot stronger, but you certainly can tame a rocket arm. And we have seen rocket arms be tamed over NFL history plenty of times. I don't know too many examples of a guy who came into the league with no arm and then all of a sudden they just, said, hey, why don't you, pump a little iron? Okay, now all of a sudden you are Jim Kelly. Woo, right? Like I've never seen that. I can't think of too many times I've seen it anyway. So you've got a great place to start with the arm strength. And you've got a great place to start with mobility. I am a huge fan of quarterbacks who can scramble for first downs. I think that's what, keeps them in games if his accuracy is waning, is the fact that he can scramble and make plays out of structure. And I like the way that JJ McCarthy has managed all of this emotionally, or at least in front of us. Like, I'm not in his house. I'm not with him behind the scenes 24/7. So I don't know all that. How, coachable and all that sort of thing he's been to the coaches from their eyes and so forth. I can only tell you what I see press conferences and when we're talking to him and the way he talks about things. But it seems to match up with his reputation, who he is, who he's been as far as coachability and all that, that it's hard to have a bad game like that and have the entire world come out and scream at the top of their lungs that you are awful. And there's no way in the year 2020-25 to avoid that stuff. And he admitted that, that stuff gets through to him. I don't think JJ has ever pretended that he didn't hear anything. You hear that sometimes. I don't hear any of that. I saw Bo Nix said that today. I don't see any of that. Sure you don't, man. Everybody, Kirk said this one time, everybody's got friends and family and everything else that, shares. Hey, I saw so-and-so said this. It's happened to this podcast. Now, I don't know necessarily with McCarthy, but it's happened to this show and this writer here many times where somebody gets sent, hey, did you see this? Matt said that kind of thing. And it's like, well, can't control that from my seat, but they have to deal with that mentally and work their way through it and work their way through failures and successes and deal with both of those things. And I think that he's built to do that, but I also think he's very, very young. And when you are very, very young, how over the top enthusiastic you get, how high you get, how low you get after wins and losses is a very difficult thing to manage. It seems to me like he's doing a good job with it. And I think if he continues to do a good job with it, he'll fight through moments like last week, as long as he doesn't let that stuff get to him. But you can't make somebody age. That's what I'm talking about with experience. You can't push the gas pedal down on time and experience. So I like the way he's handling all of it, especially in front of us. There's no, defensiveness. And when he gets asked about, accuracy or connection with Jefferson or anything like that, I think he's handled all that really, really well. And if he flies even or tries to, then he can work his way through it, because every quarterback has to learn how to do that. It was always something I greatly respected about Kirk Cousins and respected about Sam Darnold last year. So anyway, long answer to your question there. Gave you guys plenty of time for other questions. Aaron says, JJ has only played 4 games. It's hard, but we need to be patient. Ups and downs are to be expected. Sucks with the roster we have to hope he keeps improving and sets up for 2026. But that's the hard part too, is because I was having a chat with someone in the locker room today about how crazy this league is and how right now it feels pretty brutal. And yet the Packers are struggling and everybody wants their coach fired, which, I mean, if you're a Vikings fan, you're sending letters. Please fire Matt LaFleur. He's a good coach. They're struggling because their receivers are hurt, and Bo Melton got hit with a spear right in his heart from the football and didn't catch it the other night. I don't know. Eagles are good. From the outside here, it's way easier to tell the Packers, hey, do you realize Matt LaFleur is a really good coach? But anyway, there's a ton of heat being sent his way, and Chicago is beatable. And if you get these 2 wins and go from a vulnerable Green Bay team and a Chicago team that I think isn't anywhere as good as their record, then all of a sudden, like 6-5, and you're looking in the race again, and like everything changes so fast in this league that it's hard not to get caught up in it, because that's what we do. And I do a daily show. I am the problem. I am part of the problem of the overreaction. But I think I could also say, hey, we have to recognize that this could look very different in a week or in 2 weeks or in 6 weeks. It doesn't mean it will, but the fact that we don't have the entire answer yet means we don't have to try to get there. And I was making this point the other day, and I just can't emphasize it enough, that when we watch an individual game and do a post-game show and do a breakdown and a film review and all those things, that is an individual game where we can clearly say, from all the numbers, everything that we saw, this was not a good game for JJ McCarthy. And we can look at the Detroit game and say this was a good game for JJ McCarthy. But I love the way Jeremiah Searles puts it. We don't have to crown or kill after every game. And we tend to do that. And everybody around the league tends to do that. And that's why, I mean, even with Green Bay, they lost the game. It's a bad game. But I mean, man, are you trying to send Matt LaFleur out? That's kind of wild to me. Somebody who's been a really, really good head coach for that team for a really long time. So it's not just you guys, by the way. It's really everybody. It's really football. It's one of the reasons it's so successful. It's so compelling. It's so tense. It's so thrilling, but also so frustrating, because I can't spend the whole week being like, we'll see. Like, give me like 5 weeks. Let's sit here quietly and reflect for 5 weeks, and then we'll have more answers. Right? I can't do that. So we got to talk about it. But I think we could talk about it in a rational enough way to where we're saying, well, here's what we've seen through 4 games. And if you see a clean pocket completion percentage where it is for McCarthy through 4 games, that's concerning. If you see the on target percentage, that's concerning. And I know that, he has thrown the ball downfield, which inherently has a lower completion percentage. But at the same time, you have his coach saying, I really don't want you to be doing that as often as you are. I want you to be checking down and getting easy completions. So built into completion percentage is decision making. So if you have a low completion percentage, and his completion percentage above expected in this game was minus 12%. So it wasn't anywhere close. That's a next gen stat. It wasn't anywhere close to where it should have been in this game. That's the game against the Ravens. That's not the entire answer. And I think we can do that. As a society, I know we can't do that, but I tend to be a hopeful person. Purple Soda says, remember the good old days where Vikings fans didn't have to be concerned about the Bears. Well, I don't know what good old days those were, because my first time ever covering a Vikings and Bears game was 2016. It actually has recently been the good old days, right? Like now is the good old days, because Kevin O'Connell owns the Bears. Overall, I mean, how many losses did they have to Chicago since he got here? It feels like, is the answer, it can't be none, right? They must have lost at least one game. But I mean, now I got to start thinking. I don't remember 2022. They didn't lose to the Bears because the first game in 2022 was Cam Dantzler with a strip of Amir Smith-Marset to seal the game there. The last game of 2022 was, I know it. I know the one. So the second game of 2022 was when they played Tim Boyle and Nate Peterman. But the loss came in 2023 when O'Connell couldn't stop pushing the pass button for Josh Dobbs, and he threw a bunch of interceptions, didn't go for a fourth down at the end, punted. Justin Fields ends up driving and winning that was the one. That was the one that he lost. So it can happen. But when I got here, actually, it was interesting because an article I had, some of you have been listening long enough to know Paul Hodowanik, who was an intern on the show and on the writing side. And I had him do a project back in, I want to say it was 2021, where he looked at the Vegas line and the performance of the Vikings every time they went to Soldier Field. And the number of times that they were upset by bad Chicago Bears teams at Soldier Field was absolutely insane. Like, defied any type of odds or analytics or data or reason, right? And 2016 was one of them. It was a terrible Bears team. The Vikings were coming in mostly hot. They had a loss to Philadelphia, but they were still, or maybe, was it? Yeah. They had lost to Philadelphia, but they were going to Chicago, and here they go, right? Like, they should crush this team, move on, be 6-1. And then Zimmer hurts his eye. Norv quits. Who was the guy? Howard. What was his first name? Howard the running back ends up running for a huge play in the first play of the game, and then the wheels come off after that. It was just crazy. And then the one in 2018 where, Kirk before the game said they switched this game to national TV because of us. I think he said that. They flexed this game because of us, and then they lost. So O'Connell versus the Bears has been the best version, but I think you've always had to worry about the Bears. And you want to go even farther back in history. How about the time that Jim McMahon came off the bench injured and then came back against the Vikings? So, there's the excuse, John said. I mean, what, in terms of the game last week? No, I don't think it's an excuse. I mean, it could explain some of the throws that happened with McCarthy if he was dealing with a hand injury in the second half of the game. But that doesn't change the fact that overall he's been inaccurate as a quarterback in general. It's just, I think that there were maybe some throws that if he was dealing with a swollen hand throughout the game might have impacted the way he could throw the ball. I think that's really it. So, Skull Valhalla says, I think we're going to be battling injuries to JJ's whole Vikings career. See, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that. That's my point about injury prone. I won't say it about anybody. I mean, so Blake Cashman has been a little banged up the last 2 years, but nothing abnormal for a linebacker. He was hurt early in his career. The guy plays like a total psycho, but that's football though, right? I mean, I wouldn't call him injury prone, and he's had some injuries because he's playing football. McCarthy with the meniscus thing is really bad luck. The ankle injury, maybe circumstances played into how long he was actually out, that if they had a Sunday to Sunday noon home schedule and not traveled overseas, maybe that would have been a little bit different. But again, quarterbacks get ankle injuries. There's probably 3 quarterbacks dealing with it right now. So I don't want to go there with that. If anything, having a lot of injuries makes me always just feel really bad for whatever player it is. So when you say injury prone, it's almost like they did something to themselves to cause it. So I always feel very uncomfortable with that. Jonathan Grenard had injuries before he came here and hasn't had any problems. Now he gets a shoulder thing. Like, is he injury prone again? Like, we don't have to do this with every player. I'm very uncomfortable with that kind of idea of, he hit his hand on a helmet, as every quarterback does probably at some point in their career. He must be injury prone. Like, that just seems like an overreaction to me. Let's see. John says, is KOC giving up play calling? Nope. It's not worth talking about, in my opinion. It's not even worth discussing. It's not going to happen. He's not going to give up play calling. That connection with the quarterback for him is incredibly important. And as we go forward with O'Connell calling plays to JJ McCarthy, it's either going to work and be very good, or it's not. Or it's that relationship is not going to click in the way that they need it to, and he's not going to get the offense the way he's supposed to get it. And that's how it's going to be. But it's very clear. He's not changing the offense and he's not giving up play calling. And these things of people talking about, like suddenly he's going to become Mike Zimmer and start handing it off 2/3 of the time. It's not going to happen. Nor do I think that that's really the right answer for JJ McCarthy. Do I think that it's maybe too complicated or asked too much at times? Oh yeah. Oh, I do. But some of these ideas are just senseless. And I don't understand why last year it's the quarterback whisperer and it's magical, the relationship he's got in the headset with his quarterback. And now he should stop doing that. Like, okay, like past matters. And I'll continue to throw this out there. The stat about him with Kirk Cousins or Sam Darnold, 31-11 with either one of those two guys starting a quarterback does not make me scream, this man can't call plays. I think the plays are there to be made for the quarterback. He's got to execute them. He's got to understand them. And if you're saying that he's pushing too hard early on, that may be true. But also, if you run an offense that is so truncated that the defense knows all your tendencies and everything you're doing, and maybe it helps you for a week or two, but you can't really get by with that, well, you're not going to win there, and you're not going to find anything out. So at very least, if you're pushing the gas pedal down the way that they have done, then you probably are learning a lot more through trial by fire. So anytime I say, oh, I think that the idea of even discussing giving up play calling is ludicrous, or that I think overall a passing offense is the right way to go, these are things that I have forever believed in. I was more against the side of Mike Zimmer wants to hand off on first down, second down, and third down if he can. So now it's funny that we've flipped around like that. But if those are my opinions, I often get sort of attacked by bees on the internet or comment sections of, you need to stop defending O'Connell. You're afraid of him. Oh yeah, I'm really after covering Mike Zimmer, very afraid to ask a coach who's really nice answering questions something. I mean, come on. Look, I think what ends up happening is when something isn't going well, then we freak out and look for any possible explanation or answer. And Kevin Seifert says it the right way. It's like, whatever you did that didn't work, you did it wrong if it didn't work. And I don't think it works that way. So I'm not saying the play calling is perfect. My God, I'm not even close to saying that. It's just, is he going to give up play calling? No. Next question. Is he going to suddenly turn into the Mike Shanahan 1998 Denver Broncos offense? No. Next question. We just don't need to spend every day with that stuff. So they're playing a big game, by the way, against the Bears this week. And if they get a win, then they go to Lambeau with a chance to be in the race. That's exciting. Let's see. Sean says, seriously asking, has there been any thought on the team to end on the team's end to tell JJ to bring the gimmick quotes down 9 and Warriors? I've been just chalking that up to generational. I don't know. I just assume that younger kids talk this way. I mean, maybe if I was a 40-year-old sports reporter in 1967, I would have been like, man, this Joe Namath keeps saying groovy and stuff or whatever. Like, this youthful. I don't know. I think that there's different approaches to that. You could take the extremely, extremely corporate way of going about it, which is to really give no insight at all. Like Eli Manning at the podium, and it was in New York, or Sam Darnold last year. And Sam came out of his shell, but Sam took a very cautious approach and a very straightforward approach, and he didn't tell you what he's thinking. But, JJ McCarthy strikes me as the type of guy who reads a lot and tries to look for a lot of insight from the world and is taking it in and is pumping himself up with a lot of that stuff, trying to get himself hyped with a lot of that stuff. And that's just kind of how he talks. Everybody's got a different personality. I don't think that he's making himself look bad or anything. I mean, people are way too damn afraid of being made fun of, right? Like as a society, I mean, JJ McCarthy, he's not supposed to say that he's got kind of an alter ego when he goes out there, but hey, let's call Justin Jefferson Jets and Harrison Smith the Hitman. but no, this is cheesy and all that. I don't know. I just feel like that makes me seem old. I don't think it makes any difference at all, by the way. I think for the most part, like if he wants to look at himself that way, hey, like I'm an alter ego, we're warriors out there, like that's all right. It's like no one equates that with like actual people in the army or something. You know what I mean? Like we're grown up enough to deal with that, I think. It's all right. That stuff doesn't bother me at all. Let's see. Slide to play says it's a cut or a bruise. He's not in a full body cast. Yeah, that's my point about overreacting to stuff like on a day-to-day basis. Like we break down the day's news, but we don't have to overreact to the day's news in that kind of way. I agree with Eric. It's not an uncommon injury. In fact, it's extremely common. John, do I believe what I'm saying? I think that what you were addressing is maybe me saying that sorry, I'm behind in the comments as always, but with me saying that it probably impacted some throws in the game. I mean, he was limited in practice today with a hand injury and said it felt like it got slammed in a car door in the middle of the game. I don't know. Doesn't seem crazy to suggest that maybe some of those throws were potentially impacted. That doesn't mean they didn't happen. And it doesn't mean it doesn't happen to a lot of quarterbacks. You got to work your way through it and everything. I'm just saying that maybe it did because some of them looked like they were much higher than you would expect. And, maybe some of that was rushing. Maybe some of it was technical, throwing the ball 10,000 miles an hour and having it bounce off of, Justin Jefferson down the sideline. I mean, that has nothing to do with your hand injury. So just trying to be fair here, just trying to play referee. Zoomer KO, the line is still -3. So FanDuel doesn't think the hand injury. Well, I mean, FanDuel might know one way or the other, but they all came out and said it's not something that they expect to impact his playing status. Now things change. So we'll go out there tomorrow and see, and then we'll go out there, and see on Friday and see if he's limited or back to full participation or whatever. If he is limited for the entire week, that definitely makes you think about how much it could impact the game. And if somehow it gets a lot worse, I don't really know what it is. He didn't show the hand. He didn't say, anybody want to look at it? Like, who's a doctor? Do we have a doctor in the house? How do I deal with this swelling in my paw? That didn't happen. So I don't really know in terms of like how bad if it's something that could get worse or swell up more or what. I don't know. But the way that they talked about it doesn't seem like it is so serious that we need to be majorly concerned. But as far as the line being -3, I mean, I think that's very reasonable for the Vikings to be favored in this game because the lines are not usually made off. I know you didn't ask this, but the lines are not just made off of wins and loss record. I wish the people who made power rankings would make them a little more often, not just off the standings, but that's a different story. Reminder though, since you mentioned it about the FanDuel question of the day, JJ McCarthy over under on FanDuel is 214.5 yards. What is your key to him bouncing back? I'm sure I'll get to some of your answers once I scroll more. Nicholas said Jair Alexander might be retiring. Lucky we lucked out not chasing him. Yeah, something felt off with Jair for a couple years. I hope he's okay. I hope he's in a good spot because even when he was in Green Bay, just didn't seem like he was in a comfortable place. And I'm judging from some very small sample size of a handful of clips and reports and things like that. But just, that weird incident where he went out and took the coin toss when he wasn't a captain and all that sort of stuff. I don't know. Let's see. Super Rod says, can't wait to have Kelly back. Dude's going to calm down. JJ, I do think that Blake Brandel's done a good job over the last couple weeks. I'm concerned about Ryan Kelly coming back. I also think that if we're being honest about Ryan Kelly's talent, then we have to admit that he is one of the better players at the position in the NFL. So separating those two things, my concern for him personally and my hope that if he does come back, that it's a very cautious approach to coming back, a very methodical approach to coming back, and well thought out with him and his family and the team and the medical team and all that sort of stuff. If he does come back, separate that. He's a really darn good player. He is a really, really darn good player. And I don't know if they have the issues that they had last week with the cadence and all that if Ryan Kelly is in there. Probably not. Ahmed says, unfortunately, I'm convinced KOC is an analytics beholden head coach. It is the only way to explain the deep pass on 3rd and 2 and then going for a 4th and 2. Not smart, bad game awareness. Well, I don't think analytics beholden is any way I would describe Kevin O'Connell. I mean, when you match up the analytics for even like going for 4th downs and things like that, he has not really been one of the top coaches for how they match up. And I also don't think that analytics these days are screaming at the top of their lungs about, always passing. I don't think there's any data that says always pass on 3rd and 2 or 4th and 2. I'm actually quite sure that there's not. So it feels like pass equals analytics, just like when you hear, I loved the other night with Troy Aikman. Joe Buck said, well, the analytics say here that they should punt. And it was just stunned silence from Troy Aikman. You're like, yeah, dude, sometimes those actually do say to punt. Just like it's not analytics to pass. He's a former dang quarterback who won the Super Bowl with his quarterback throwing for 5,000 yards. It's not that deep. It really isn't. I mean, Matthew Stafford in 2021, when they won the Super Bowl, let me check how many yards it actually was for Matthew Stafford in 2021. It was a lot. I promise you that. 4,888 yards, 41 touchdowns, 36 big-time throws, but also 17 interceptions for Matthew Stafford when they won the Super Bowl in 2021. It's probably more rooted in his experience of winning a Super Bowl with Sean McVay than it is him, reading Purple Insider's, breakdown of pass efficiency. But it is a fundamental truth of football that explosive plays will result in better chances to score. I mean, that's just absolutely true. And look who his defensive coordinator is. This all matches up, my friends. It is an aggressive, risky type of way of playing. It reminds me a lot of Bruce Arians' no risk it, no biscuit. You're going to throw down the field. When Nick Mullins is your quarterback, you're having Nick Mullins throw, or when Kirk is, or when Darnold is, or when JJ is. This is the offense, and we've seen it win a lot when it works. And I think that he believes that it works. You just need to figure it out, but I think he also knows that it takes time for it to work. So in the interim, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, like, can we compare it to some sort of like a movie where it's somebody being trained to do something and they're teaching them the hardest possible way. And then there's a montage. And then after the montage, it finally clicks and they get it. Oh, that's how you do it. And then it works. Like, that's what it feels like with O'Connell and quarterback play, where there's a lot, but when it clicks, then it's very good. It can take some major jumps up and down along the way, though. But I don't think there's a analytically beholden. In fact, it sounded today like stats drive him crazy is what it sounded like today when he was mentioning like how if they have a run play called, but they switch to a pass, they count it as a run. And I'm like, sure. Yeah. Why not? I think that some of those, when he said, put it in a statistical column and all that sort of stuff, that he's saying that some of the numbers drive him crazy more than that he loves them. Nick says your whole show is based on judging stuff each week. Yeah, I know. I admit. But I like football too much not to talk to you guys all the time. So what we try to do here, and this goes to the reporting background and why I go out every day to TCO Performance Center and into the locker room and talk to the players and all that sort of stuff. And the other various folks around the National Football League that I speak with on a weekly basis is to try to gather as much as I can to contextualize as much as I can with every situation we're in. Because if we just wait till we have all the answers, then I'll see you in February. And how fun is that for me? That sounds terrible. or January in this case, but even about the NFL at large. If we could only react after we had all the answers, then I guess it's the Purple Insider off-season show where we have all the answers. And we can only do the show until March because once they start making moves and we don't know what the answers are going to be, then we got to wait till all next season to see if the answers are right. And then this show will exist from February 6th until March 12th. And that's it. So old Purple Insider and everybody else has to work with the information we have, but we can use our brains, folks. We can look at the history of the league and quarterbacks and development and all those things. And we could say 4 games is probably not enough to know. And 4 games in this offense, I think it's got to be even more than that to have a good sense. And we can also say that if they win back-to-back games here, and McCarthy plays like he did against Detroit, that I promise there will be a lot of reaction the other way around. So yeah, you're right. It is part of the problem to do a daily show, but we try to do it the best that we can and the most reasonable we can, because the overreactionary stuff is not my favorite. So Nick says, Jeremiah said it best. We won't know until the end of next year at the earliest. Give JJ McCarthy time. That's absolutely true. That in terms of really knowing, yeah, it probably will be 2026 before we really, really, really know as far as, hey, can this guy be somebody that you're going forward with for a really long time? But I don't think it has to be that long before we could start to draw better conclusions than the one we have now. What we have now is a very exciting win against Chicago, a very poor game against Atlanta with lots of circumstances around it. We have a very good win against Detroit that had some ups and downs, but a lot of high-end stuff. And then we have a loss to the Ravens that had some high-end stuff and some concerning stuff. Is that enough to write a Nobel Prize winning piece about? Like, no, it's not. It's that to me is less than a quarter of a season to work with. Imagine about the Timberwolves if you were trying to judge them by the end of November last year or something, right? Or even into December, and they go to the Western Conference Final, but they weren't a great team. Well, we're trying to do that with JJ McCarthy in his entire career. So it's just not enough. That doesn't mean it doesn't count. It doesn't mean we can't work with it and talk about what it needs to get better. But I think that is on the way in the next 8 games. Not, oh my gosh, he's Joe Montana or he is Kyle Bowler. But do we all have the sense that it's trending in the right direction by the end of the year? Do we all have the sense that the inaccuracies or the timing or the turnovers, that those things have dissipated and his comfort with the offense is much greater, and his comfort throwing and his technical parts of throwing is much greater as we go forward week to week? And I've always thought if you win half of these 8 games, that it's probably gone pretty well. But there's going to be other ones where we spend a week going, man, what the heck happened there? I guarantee that. But if we're getting to the end of the season and it looks like, yes, think about this, if 90%, because there's always going to be jokers, if 90% of Vikings fans in the state of Minnesota and abroad could all check yes to, do you want JJ McCarthy for your quarterback for 2026? Then we've probably seen him make gains and look pretty good. If that's 50%, 40%, then, and I know that talk about an unscientific, unanalytical way to do it, but that's what I think is that we'll have a sense for it. It might not be a statistic that gives us the answer there. It might not be, oh, his completion percentage is this, his QB rating is that, his QBR, his PFF, I don't know, like all that stuff. It might not be one answer. It might be a more of, do we all sense that he's really getting it? That's what we're looking for, I think. I don't think you need until next year for that. I think we can figure some of that out by this year. Carl says, I don't know how he could say it's a results-based thing with also ignoring the results. Yeah, no, and this is something I struggle with all the time, Carl, myself, is that when people say process over results, I'm like, okay, like I get what you're saying, is that you want to draw conclusions from the right things. So if you make a stupid decision and you throw the ball up into the air senselessly and it bounces off of somebody's helmet, hits the referee, lands on a squirrel, and then your receiver picks it up and runs it into the end zone. I mean, that's not repeatable. You're not going to say, well, great job. You made the worst decision in the world, but it had to bounce off a squirrel. Like, that's not how you do this. It's making good decisions repeatedly with good technique and all that sort of that's a process thing. Where I don't agree is when people say, well, it's not about the results. And that goes for play calling too. And I listened to Zach Lowe's podcast a lot, and he had an interview years ago with Stan Van Gundy where he said to Van Gundy, like, hey, remember this one play? And hey, you had a really good inbound play for that. You got an open look. And Stan said, I didn't have a good inbound play there. And he's like, what do you mean? The guy was got a wide open shot. It was a good play. And he's like, well, if it didn't work, then I didn't call the right play. And I think that we've gone a little too far into the like, hey, if it didn't work out, then as long as I can justify it, like that's not how this works. It's not how anything works. As long as I could justify it, I am right and I had the right process. It's like I don't know if everything gets that free pass like that. I think football people and across sports love it because every time they're asked about something that went wrong, they're like, "Well, I was actually right." You're like, "Oh, okay, all right. Well, I thought I saw the guy intercept the pass." So, but I guess, and look, I actually like the third down call because that play happens all the time and it works, and Jefferson's great. And like, I agreed with that one. I didn't like the other one later, the 3rd and 2 and 4th and 2, but the point is just the results are everything. That's all that matters. The excuses and everything else don't matter. So I understand where process and results come from. And I get why it's used so often. Like I understand, but if you call a play that results in a really bad interception that completely changes the game, it's pretty hard to say, actually, no, it was a great call. I mean, I don't know. That's just, maybe it's just been beaten into the ground so much. It's been said so many times of the process versus results. You want to have, the idea is that if you make good decisions that have a better chance to succeed than they fail, that sometimes they will fail and everyone will second guess you, but you want to continue to make really good decisions. I get that, but I don't think it's an answer to, I am right all the time. Like everything that went wrong, it's actually my wonderful process. Well, if it goes wrong too often, then the process doesn't make sense. So anyway, I don't mean to get off on that total tangent, but I think I get as frustrated as some of you do by some of those platitudes about process and results. The results in the NFL are all that matters. They do not hire and fire coaches or give you Super Bowl rings based on, well, you argue that your process was good. Here's a ring. Anyway, let's see. Let's see. Nasaj maybe says 4 games is the universally recognized amount of time to make a decision. No quarterback has ever needed longer than that. That's funny. Zoomer KO says the KOC not running thing was never an issue before this year because the running game was never good enough to rely on basically any situation. Now we have the dudes to run, so we have to do it. That's fair. That's very fair. First half of last year, I thought they did a good job of running, but they were mostly leading in games. But I think that's fair. And this is where I do agree. Like, my point is it's going to be a passing offense. So we can't every single situation that they don't run that maybe traditionally you would run. We just scream until our eyes bleed about it when it's a pass first offense. And that's how it's always going to be because your best player is number 18 and your third best player is number 3. And like those guys catch balls and you should do that, right? They should be the focus of what you do because when you get away from that, then you get Stephon Diggs and Mike Zimmer, right? But your point is exactly correct. This current situation is the best that they've had to run the football, period. And if they came out this week and ran 30 times and threw the ball 18 times, I don't think anybody would be mad if that was what was winning in the game. And where it got, I think, frustrating a little bit in the Ravens game was you saw it working. Like, oh, there's a big run from Aaron Jones. There's a big run from Jordan Mason. And now you're not doing it anymore. So that's where I think it got frustrating for some people. Steven says, what does it say about KOC and the Vikings organization if McCarthy can't handle what KOC puts in front of his plate? The chicken and egg thing is the hardest. I mean, one is we don't really know how much percentage of this offense versus with Sam Darnold. Is it what he asked Kirk to do? Is it what he asked Sam Darnold to do? Is it a pared down version of that should be easier, but it's not? At times it has looked easier, like when they're playing Detroit and he's only having to throw for 143 to win the game and they convert on a screen on a third down, or, a rollout where TJ Hawkinson is open and that's an easier type of play for him. A big part of the Ravens game and JJ's worst performances in that Ravens game often were when, you're trying to come back and you've got to drop back over and over and over again. And that's very hard to do for good quarterbacks. And it's extremely hard to do for a young quarterback like that, which is why, I talked a little bit about this last week about, hey, don't let the score dictate everything for you, because then you get into that type of situation where your pass to run ratio, while you're down 2 scores and trying to come back, is, I think I had it like 19-1 or 19-2 for called runs. So, like that's where it does get particularly difficult. I mean, you're right overall about, like, you have to have the right amount that your quarterback can handle. And it's a reasonable question of, have they asked him to do too much? Have they put too much on his plate? And I think the other part of that is that the bet they made was that he would be able to handle a lot on his plate. And I don't know if they thought he would be able to handle it in 4 weeks of starting. I think they thought at this point he'd be halfway through the season and not have an injury that set him back. But they installed the entire offense through the offseason with the expectation that it was built for him, and it was evaluated throughout training camp and pared down for him. And he's helping pick the plays as they go into each game and all those things. And then, is it too much? Like, I don't know. I don't, because I don't know all the plays and all the reads and everything else versus what maybe some other young quarterback is asked to do. I think that as an overall philosophy, you have to find the middle ground of that. Like, you have to have a complicated offense enough for it to succeed in the NFL. Because if you don't, if you just walk up to the line of scrimmage with a play call that's 15 and, hey, we're going to call 15 here on 1. And the 15 is everybody just runs everybody just runs an out route or something. I mean, if the defense is in a look that's going to intercept the out route that you're supposed to throw, but you don't have adjustments, you don't have motions, you can't change your matchups there at the line of scrimmage based on what you see, they're going to just intercept it and run it for a touchdown. That's why college coaches stink in the NFL, is because their offenses aren't complicated enough. So that's where it becomes really, really hard to put our finger on. Are you asking too much or not? Or is it not performing? Or do you need to continue to ask a lot of him to get to the point where he gets reps doing all this stuff? Because this is where I feel about CJ Stroud. Like, the farther you push the ball down the road or kick the can down the road with actually having your quarterback play full quarterback, then when you need him to do it, it's kind of like Mitch Trubisky in that first year. Like, yeah, you could kind of rig it up a little bit in the first year if you have a great defense and they've never seen this quarterback before. And if you got a run game and play action and rollouts and only throw in favorable situations, but then at some point that just isn't going to work. And then you have to, turn up the dial, and is he going to be able to handle it? So I think it's the hardest thing in the sport. It is the absolute hardest thing in the sport. Adam says the Rams ran last month in 12 personnel 83% of the time. They have changed. Yes, they have. They are doing a very good job of using their bigger personnel, and they're setting a trend, and they're running play actions, and they're working off their run game. They have. My point was that, when Kevin O'Connell wins the Super Bowl in 2021, he does it with a quarterback throwing for almost 5,000 yards. So it's not an offense that's going to be rooted in handing off a bunch of times, but big personnel, they like big personnel. I mean, they've got Josh Oliver and they use him a lot. And they run a lot out of 12 personnel. So they do mix up their personnel. Nick says, Kirk and Sam Darnold both said that KOC has a complex system. I think McCarthy was picked because they think he can learn it, just a matter of time. Well, that's another part too, is that, McCarthy, when they picked him, they flew out to Ann Arbor and O'Connell sat down with him and they went to the whiteboard and they broke stuff down and they went out and, they got on the field like a Gruden camp type of thing and had him go through stuff and had him do all this and that and everything else. Right. And they came away with the conclusion that he was somebody that could handle a lot mentally. And I don't actually think that it's been the mental part for JJ McCarthy. That's another part that's a little bit to me, I don't know. I think it's been really just the throwing of the ball and the timing, where just a good example is the Jefferson drop in the end zone. And this does not apologize for Jefferson, but I was trying to figure out an explanation for why it happened. I think on that play, if you watch McCarthy, he takes 2 hitches forward and then lets the ball go, where I think it's supposed to be 1 because he's supposed to catch it coming out of his break. So think about the tiny little difference there between, 1 step forward and throw, slower with anticipation, guide the ball in there, or 1, 2 and rip, and how different that is to catch for Jefferson. And again, he should catch it. He should catch it. That's his ball to drop. No doubt about it. Change the game if he catches that ball. But the point just being that it's a little example of maybe how he makes a good decision and he finds the right receiver. And there was one detail that threw off the play a little bit, but that's not because he didn't throw it to the right place or he wasn't making the right decision or he didn't see where he's supposed to go with the ball. It's just that he needs to hitch once instead of twice. And I think that's been most of the issues, which I think is better because that feels like it's easier to fix than if you don't see the field at all. I've always thought that he sees the field pretty well. It's just that everything's happening in lightning speed and is by design down to the finest detail. And if one of those is ever so slightly off, like I mentioned the Malachi Starks interception, where Starks says, yeah, he's a little late on it. It's like, yeah, it's the right decision probably, but he's a little late on it. And you know how he's going to get not late on it is by doing it week in and week out, right? So I don't know if you start paring down the offense to where you only run screens and flats. And hey, guess what they're saying in Green Bay now? This is actually funny. Guess what they're saying in Green Bay? They're saying that LaFleur, who has done a great job of papering over the shortcomings of Jordan Love as a complete quarterback, which at times he is not the guy that you just want dropping back and, throwing a bunch of 15, 20-yard passes. He's a lot of underneath stuff, play action, whatever. I've always thought that was a really good approach to him. They're saying they need to put more on the shoulders of Jordan Love. So there's a guy who's pared it down, built off the run game, and now it's, hey, you actually need to do that. It kind of feels like the Kirk discussion for a long time. Lean into Kirk. Whoa, don't lean into Kirk that much. No, don't. Unlean. No, wait, no, too much run game. It's like, where does this ever get right? If McCarthy was making a bunch of terrible decisions and had no idea where to throw the football, then I would probably say, wow, they are screwing this up. But I just don't think it's that. I mean, I think that he's actually doing a good job with his overall decision-making. JK McVay has evolved. They're much more balanced to KOC. No, I understand. I look, McVay is the best of the best. One of the greatest coaches of all time. There's no question about that. And he's evolved based on his personnel. They've got Nakua and kind of nobody else other than Devontae Adams. So they've got 2 receivers and that's it. So they're using this big personnel. They've switched, but guess where McVay came from? Originally, Shanahan's system. So they've gone back to some of that. In 2021, it was more shotgun stuff. And it was a lot more leaning into the pass. I mean, look, the trend right now is, it's a lot of play action. It's a lot of bigger personnel for sure. And the Vikings have been missing Josh Oliver. But when we talk about an overall philosophy, there's always been coaches, and there still are, that are either run first, pass first type of coaches. And Kevin O'Connell is rooted in being a pass first coach. And it's had a really good amount of success. Now, it hasn't won a playoff game. They've had 2 shots at that, but it's when the starting quarterback has been locked in, then it's had a lot of success. And when his starting quarterback's not in there, he's 7-11 because, or I should say starting, when either Darnold or Cousins is not in there, he's 7-11, which I think it tells you, yeah, if the quarterback can run it, then it's working. And if they can't, then it's not. Which is what you get with a pass first offense. So I know, like, our brain, I get as much time to talk as I want. So I try to like really get into every nuance of the discussion. And I feel like in a yelly segment culture or like TikTok culture, it has to be the entire conclusion in one sentence. Does he suck or not? What I'm saying is there's a lot of nuances to this, but being rooted in a pass first offense is not like some dumb, crazy thing to do. The game hasn't changed that much over the last couple years. And if you win the Super Bowl doing it with this offense and being in pass first, then you're probably going to believe in that and buy into that. And you've had so much success doing it. Like last year, they're 14-3 with a pass first offense. The league didn't change that much from last year. You got to have the quarterback make the throws. So I think just, run more. I don't know. I guess you're going to have to go watch the Colts. Like, this team probably is never going to do it. I think they'll run more this week because the Bears are not good at stopping the run. And if they do, then we'll be like, see, he adjusted, even if it's just the Bears stinking against the run. But I just don't think that overall that's ever going to be the case. Do I agree with a lot of you when you say, hey, this is I was the one banging the drum last year. Hey, you're up. How many times last year did I say, hey, you're up against Green Bay 14-0 or whatever it was. And I think it might have been 21. If you just get a field goal here, this game is absolutely over. And then they throw an interception. So I've been banging this drum at times of situational type of stuff. Where I felt like, yeah, you need to run the ball there. You need to hammer into it. Like, hey, it's like I said earlier, it's working. Keep doing it. And sometimes they don't. So I'm with you on individual type stuff, but just overall yelling, run more. That's just not enough detail for me of just run more. Okay, well, then hire Mike Zimmer back, I guess. Steven says one key to McCarthy bouncing back. Oh, yes, the FanDuel question of the day. Thank you, Steven. The FanDuel question of the day being that McCarthy's over-under is 214.5. What is your key to him bouncing back? And your key, Steven, is accuracy and intermediate throws, means no picks, minimal batted balls at the line of scrimmage. Yep, the batted balls for sure. And I think that all of that is rooted in the feet in the pocket. That when the pocket is clean, that you're not taking big steps up right into the back of the offensive lineman, that you're settling yourself and turning and throwing. I was getting some messages from Jeremiah Searles last night about old Sam Darnold or Sam Bradford throws. Some really great Sam Bradford throws that he was looking at on tape. And just watching Bradford throw the ball, he gets his base and he's planted, and it's more of a hip turn and drive for the football, not a long stride and throw. And when McCarthy, you actually heard him talk about this, when McCarthy gets a little bit, I think, over anxious or deep into a game and he's trying really hard to win. And that's where some of those old habits start to come out, where there's some plays where he stays square in his base and he's not overstriding, that kind of thing. But then like last game, it happened at times. But yes, I agree with you. Like the turnovers that just can't happen, the accuracy on intermediate. I think actually accuracy of short passing is really key. That's where I think they need to do a lot better. He's averaging 3.5 yards a pass. I almost said per carry because that's like what you do per carry. 3.5 yards per attempt on throws that are under 10 yards between 0 and 10. So not screens behind the line of scrimmage. Like that's not enough. Not enough. Yes. Nosage. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. It says it's hilarious that Vikings fans are screaming for more run game, and KO is terrible. Well, Green Bay, it's too much run, and LaFleur is terrible. And what do they have in common? They lost. They lost. So 2 weeks ago, Matt LaFleur is coach of the year and Jordan Love is the MVP. And now they stink. Like, this is in a league that has so many teams that are just okay. This is the world we live in. That's what it feels like. Steven says, I don't think anyone is asking for a 70% run rate. Fans would just like a more balanced offensive approach. That I think is very fair. It's always going to lean a little bit more toward the pass and probably should from a statistical perspective, but balance the right timing to some of those things. I agree. And look, if you're going to say marry the run with the pass, then you have to run successfully and then build off it. And this is a time where you can. Where they may have gotten over anxious, which I think does happen, is when they fumble. And I think there is a little bit of this pressing when it comes to the pass. And we've seen it in the past. And sometimes it's pressing to just win a game that you're ahead. Like, oh, we're ahead. Let's get the big explosive that ends this team. And then if you don't get it, it doesn't end that team. That's what we saw a lot of last year. This year, it's, we're behind, pressing to come back, when actually their best comeback against Chicago started with a couple of big Jordan Mason runs. So this is where I agree. And this is where I'm asking, anytime you make this criticism, like, give me your specific thought. Like, what is it you're really getting at, as opposed to just play calling or run more? Those two things are far too vague for me. But this is a good point where we can say they fumbled the ball on the kickoff. They got down 19-10. Then they felt like they had to get it all back on the next drive. And that's where they got away from it after a very successful run to start that drive. And they should have probably stuck with it from there. See, that's what I'm talking about. From an individual perspective, that's where I think you can have success. KOC's offense is 90% throw and 10% run. That's not true. Never has been. Let's see. It's always been more 60-40. Modern Moose says the kid needs work, but I'm quite fine with that. Our rookie quarterback didn't magically appear as Mahomes 2.0. I think he'll be fine. Give him time. Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of whether he will be fine or not, I don't think anybody knows. We just really don't know whether he's going to be fine or not. I think both outcomes are on the table. There is an outcome on the table that he doesn't work out. Of course there is. And there's an outcome on the table where he's in the middle and he's frustrating. And there's an outcome on the table where he's absolutely fantastic. And I don't know which one of it's going to be right now. That's my point, is when you say, well, he'll be fine. And I see this a lot on, like, hey, well, you're talking about this, that he'll be fine. Like, we don't know if he'll be fine. We don't know anything at the moment. All we know is that, see now, and the other thing is too, that, and I'm guilty of this, where I talked about, hey, he's not a rookie quarterback. He learned a lot last year, and then he looked way more like a rookie than I expected. But now it's, he's a rookie quarterback. Well, that's not really true. I mean, we also have to hold him to a standard of a team that was trying to win now, thought that he was ready to win now, and he has been in this league for 2 years. But the stuff that we're talking about with the technical throwing elements, that's where he has not had those years. So in terms of running an offense, understanding an offense, handling all the KOC has to give him, that's where he has 2 years. And that's where I think a little bit of that, is it too complex, breaks down, because he has had 2 years with the offense. He just hasn't had of the running of the offense, which is where some of the timing and the throws end up getting messed up. But we're in a spot of not knowing much more than saying, it'll be fine, or, it's terrible, it's all over. So thank you so much to Dilly for the super chat. Sorry, I'm just getting to it, Dilly. That was probably an hour ago. I apologize for that. Dilly says the best thing for bouncing back is to continue to stay healthy so he can finish the season and get more reps. Hopefully he can finish the season on a high note going into next year. Again, thank you so much for that super chat. Definitely not required, but always, always appreciated. As far as staying healthy, it's absolutely vital. And that's where the hand injury is. Okay, I'm going to, like, they don't seem to be panicking over it, so it should be okay. But if it becomes a thing, then you start to wonder about how that could affect it. But I don't want to go down that road, because they're talking about it as if there should be no impact other than being limited in today's practice, no impact on the actual game status. That you were answering, I believe, the FanDuel question of the day, which was McCarthy 214.5 is his yardage over under on FanDuel. What is your key to him bouncing back? So let me get back here. Nicholas says next 2 years will tell us a lot about KOC. Not a lot of 2022 coaching hires left. Yeah, isn't it crazy? And that's when it comes to firing coaches, you better be sure, because there are a lot of coaches who cannot do this and are just bad. I don't think that Brian Daboll was a horrible coach, but clearly, when you're losing the way that he was losing, you've lost control there, and you haven't been able to just produce enough. And that's where, hey, a lot of people like Brian Daboll. A lot of people think he's a smart coach and he's really good, but results are the thing that at the end of the day matters. As far as KOC goes, I'm not ready for that discussion of like, how do we judge KOC? If McCarthy doesn't work out, then where does this go? And I don't think we're just not there yet. This is a head coach to me who's proven enough over 3 years that I don't think that discussion becomes at all appropriate. I mean, I know that people love to say someone should be fired. They love when someone is fired. It's, I guess, very exciting when a coach is fired because hope springs eternal at that point. You've gotten so mad at the other person that you love to see them fired. But also, it's ridiculous to talk about. And I feel the same way about LaFleur in Green Bay. It's just, I'm sure it's really fun to let out your rage by saying someone should be fired, but it's absurd to talk about. You brought up a great example. There's so many of those 2022 coaches who just couldn't coach at all. Josh McDaniels, Nate Hackett, like those guys. Oh my gosh. We're not even close to being good NFL coaches. You have a good NFL head coach who was coach of the year last year. Sometimes you would think that he went, 3-14 last year with the way it's talked about. But then if I point out his win-loss record and award from last year, well, stop defending KOC. That's a little frustrating for me this week, I guess. But the point just being that there is a body of work here that, to me, doesn't warrant any sort of even remote discussion about something like that. It's really more of how can this coach and this quarterback best pair themselves together for this team to succeed. And if McCarthy is not succeeding, then what can the coach do to get him back on track? And there might be nothing. I think that there's a lot there to work with. So it shouldn't be nothing. And maybe that's a hard part too for fans. It's like you see the flashes, you see the moments. It's not like there's nothing there, but consistency probably is going to come with time. Let's see. Nicholas says, even as bad as JJ's game versus Baltimore was, if Jefferson catches the one off his hands, doesn't trip, and we don't fumble away a kick return, we probably would have won the game. Now, you're right about that. I mean, I don't know if you win or not, but you're right about how, some of these games that play out, and this was a discussion I was having with someone in the locker room today, just about how that's what keeps you up at night about football sometimes is you're exactly right. And I grew up in Buffalo, and if the kicker kicks it 5 feet to the left instead of wide right, then they would have a Super Bowl. And the same thing goes for the folks of Minnesota with a kick to the wide left probably would have a Super Bowl. And like, that's football. It drives you crazy because you're right. If you don't fumble a kickoff, it's 12-10 at that point. If Jefferson catches that ball, and I saw a win probability chart that their win probability would have been 20% higher if he catches that ball and goes into the end zone. And then maybe McCarthy's playing very differently. And then he's not having to throw the ball 40-something times. And then they maybe are getting him some easier looks and building off the run. And everything could play out so much differently. Unfortunately, that is imagination land, and we can't really play in imagination land because we don't know what would have really happened after that. But I do agree that it wasn't like the game was anywhere as atrocious as I feel like the response to the game was. Like, it was bad, and they were outplayed at the end of the day by the Ravens and probably didn't even deserve a chance to have the ball at the end to try to go tie, considering the big mistakes they made. And big mistakes are what determines whether you win or lose. But there were also some circumstances that caused them to get behind in the game. And then it was like they had lost by 40 when that was not the case. I mean, their losses, Pittsburgh was kind of this way. It was like, well, they had a chance to come back at the end. They had some big mistakes. And again, it felt like you lost by 40 as opposed to 3 or as opposed to 8. There are other games this year that have been worthy of that type of reaction, like against Los Angeles or against Atlanta. So not saying it was good, but there is part of it that's like, okay, it was rough. It wasn't the worst quarterback play any of us have ever seen. It wasn't the worst loss we've ever seen the Vikings have. And the other team has Lamar Jackson, and they're very good, and sometimes you don't win. So, but all that stuff, I mean, it is self-inflicted in some ways. It's like and I don't know if it was, but if the timing is off or, Jefferson is not as focused because he's frustrated or whatever, it's like it all kind of stems back to they need to play a certain way in order to win with McCarthy right now. And they did not play that way against the Baltimore Ravens. Marcus says, I get the KO wants to get the ball to Jets, but there are other receivers to throw that are open. Yeah, it's true. But they've also had a very good offense driven by Justin Jefferson. And he can't have 50 yards a game with JJ McCarthy at quarterback. No other quarterback that we've seen run this team has had this little success throwing to Justin Jefferson. This offense works to get Jefferson the football. The quarterback has to deliver it. Even when Nick Mullins can do it, the quarterback has to deliver it. Mullins didn't know where to go with the ball, though. I mean, he was very good at that. He just couldn't really throw it there. Northern Pride says, I wish McCarthy had just run the ball himself a few of those times on 3rd and 4th down, had lots of room. The interception, he had room. And sometimes it's felt like he almost wants to, and I don't know, I don't want to get inside of his head, but it's almost felt like he wants to prove he can make the throw when he's scrambling as opposed to just taking the run. And it also has felt like he wants to prove that he can throw it to the downfield option as opposed to the check down. And I think that's what Kevin O'Connell is trying to really emphasize here. Friends of Taz says the fact that Darnold is balling out is what makes watching the Vikings offensive struggles feel magnified. There's a lot of people who will try to deny that. There's no denying it that is absolutely true, that the success of Sam Darnold is adding to the angst of Minnesota Vikings fans. I don't know how it couldn't. And the team, I'm sure the team, the organization, I'm sure everybody, you can't miss it. The guy's playing at an MVP level. And the whole thought was, well, we can whisper a quarterback, look what we did with Darnold. And then, he's playing even better the next year. And we'll see how he does from here. He's got some injuries on his offensive line. His center is hurt. And he will have, I'm sure, some challenges coming up, including Brian Flores' defense, where maybe he looks like the bad version of Sam Darnold that we haven't seen all year for Seattle. He's not the best quarterback in the NFL, I don't think. But when you see a quarterback playing like that, who you just had win 14 games for you last year, how does that not factor into how you feel about JJ McCarthy and his development in that decision? How do we separate the Darnold, Jones, to some extent Rodgers, but let's just stick with those two, decision, the timeline, the roster strength, what happened last year, separate that from JJ McCarthy and reasonable analysis of his development? That's my question. Because you can't, because they made a bet that his development would be faster than this, and it hasn't been. That doesn't mean he's a bust, but it means that they did make that bet. They did make that assumption that his development was going to be farther along at this point than it has been. They made that bet with the roster build, and they put the money into the roster based on the idea he was going to be better than that. And if the goalposts get moved around, I'm not going to be too pleased when it comes to if we hear, well, this was always going to be a year to develop JJ. No, it freaking wasn't. This was supposed to be a year to win. And the receipts are in overthecap.com. So I don't want to hear any of that. But it's a factor for how it looks and how it feels for them to have gone to him. But we don't have to put that all on JJ all the time. That's a bigger, more global, it's a more complicated thing because of the cap, because of the politics of a decision like that. If Sam Darnold gets franchise tagged and then he has a tough game against Atlanta in week 2 with the tackles out, then the stadium is booing and cheering for McCarthy because they have created McCarthy in their heads that he was this perfect, flawless, absolutely marvelous QB1 in waiting, Mahomes level type of magical quarterback. He was everything that Darnold wasn't in people's heads. We have to remember that the reaction to any Darnold failure would have been, oh, we could have been spending all this money. It's Kirk all over again. So we have to keep that in mind, that Darnold wouldn't have signed here because of that. He wouldn't have signed when he had to have looking over his shoulder. And the only way to keep him would have been tagging him, which would have made things a lot more tricky. But if you deny that it's weighing into the angst about this whole thing, then I think you're fooling yourself. But this was supposed to be a year to win, and it still can be. I don't think that that's over. I said they have to win 2 out of 4, and they have to be 500 by the time they get to, let's see, 6-6 is probably the worst they could do, because that's when they have some easy games coming up after that. And if you can get, I mean, think about this. If you go 500 through the Seattle game after Detroit, so you're 6-6, and then you have Washington and the Giants. Who am I missing? Somebody else in there that's a winnable game. Oh, Dallas, a winnable game. And you get 2 out of 3 there. I mean, then you're in it, right? So I don't even think that the season is over in the way that we've talked about it, based on the fact they needed to beat Detroit in order to have that happen, to not be over, and they did beat Detroit. So they're not in a position where the whole thing's been decided yet. Modern Moose says folks don't really understand the level of physicality in the NFL, how hard it is to stay healthy. That's definitely true. Yeah, well, it's so much easier to sit home and just call people injury prone than, stuff like that. It's very easy to say a lot of stuff because there's no consequences to saying stuff. Joe says, I feel like I've heard a lot of QBs say it's easier to protect yourself head first. Yeah, I don't know. I have never slid head first or feet first. I do know if you take a shot sliding feet first, it's pretty tough. CJ says Dante needed time. JJ has a hodgepodge of playing and sitting over his first 2 years. If the results end up similar, I'd take Dante's 2000, 2004 from JJ. Yeah, well, those are amazing years. Yeah, those are the highest possible end. The highest possible end of what we could see from JJ McCarthy. But to your point, Dante, even from year to year, had his ups and downs. But the world didn't see everybody else's reactions and make everyone panic all the time in the same way that they do now. The media world, the social media world has really changed just how all of that works. Because now we're in a spot where if the team is down 3-0, then 100 people right in front of your face are writing messages. This is why we do a Substack chat and I don't tweet anymore during games, because it just made me unhappy to see tweets during games. So I just completely shut it off. I just thought this is distracting. It's distracting to be this distressed that people are acting like their house is on fire because the team gave up a 3rd down conversion. So to me, like that freak out just permeates everywhere. And that didn't used to happen because we just didn't have that much access. You'd have your local writers write about it and maybe Patrick Royce take a jab at them or something. And Sid would write that everything was fine. And you'd go forward from there and talk about it at the water cool with your friends, as opposed to logging on every day and just seeing 100 other people tweet as if they're dying with every single play. So that I think that weighs into just how we feel rushed to have the answers on all of these things, when even as you mentioned with Dante, or there's other quarterbacks throughout history where there's been ups and downs and eventually you get to the other side with it. But I'm sure the ups and downs didn't feel like this, where every single week ends up being just painful if it's a down week. Jets and Hitman earned the right to be called those names. Okay, so he's gotta earn the right to call himself his number on his jersey. Okay, get over yourself. He's 22 years old. I don't know, man. We don't have to be that way. Let's see. Take a quick little Diet Dr. P here. Joe says, so we need a montage for McCarthy. Well, that's really it, right? That's what I'm talking about, is that the week to week can be very stressful. The play to play can be very stressful. What we need is a montage. That's right. We need a montage of McCarthy and O'Connell, and they're in a field in the snow in Russia, and he has two wolves tied around his feet, and he's saying, if you don't get the footwork right, then the wolves bite you every time. And so then he throws one with too long of a stride, and the wolf bites him. Gah! And he does it again. Gah! And then he finally gets it right as the music is playing of Eye of the Tiger. And then he finally clicks it. And then he climbs a mountain. Right? That's what we need here. We need to simulate. What we really need for this discussion is to simulate like 6 weeks later and see how it looks. But we can't do that. So that's why we break down the nuances of what's going on from a day-to-day basis. And then we'll start to get there a little bit later and really figure it out. It's like Mr. Miyagi. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's like a Rocky or that kind of thing. That's what they need. We just got to do that. That's funny. Steve says with a bruised hand, could he be more accurate? Jay, why has KOC not been able to win a playoff game? I mean, do you need me to explain that to you, Jay? I think that you saw them. Eric, how can we avoid the batted balls? That's a good question. So my takeaway for the batted balls was, number one, if you look at batted balls, it's pretty random year to year. I mean, and that makes sense, right? That fits. So just for example, this year, Caleb Williams is number one in batted balls. I'll take a look at was he number one last year? So is there something? He was this year, Caleb Williams has as many batted balls as he did all of last year. So I don't know. Kirk was a good example of where he had some years he had a lot, some years he didn't have that many. But I don't think that it was entirely random in this game. I think what the Ravens did was they had a plan. They had a plan to push the pocket and get their hands up because they don't have guys that are just going to win quick. So they were strategizing to do it. I also think when you take a big stride right up to the line of scrimmage where, let's say you're dropping back to, let's just call it 10 yards. You drop back, set at 10 yards, and then what you want to do is you want to hitch, but you don't want to like leap forward. And there were a time or two where his hitch was whoop to 5 yards. And once you get there, then you are right up the offensive lineman's back end. And then you're trying to throw over. And sometimes those hitches sent him a little bit like maybe left. He's trying to throw back right and the arm comes down a little bit and then it's a low trajectory. And I think that his throws are a low trajectory anyway. So he might have a lot of these throughout his career, I suppose. And teams are going to think about that. But that was the reason that I came away with. And they're probably going to look at that into the future. Let's see. Modern Moose, people trash KOC without acknowledging how many different starting quarterbacks he's had to coach. Well, look, I mean, if you're an NFL head coach, this is where I don't cry any tears for Kevin O'Connell. He's got a big contract extension. He's gotten a ton of praise throughout his time coaching this team. Nationally, he's gotten a ton of praise and all that sort of thing. Coach of the year last year, and he's deserved it when you win 14 games with Sam Darnold. He's earned it in the locker room. He's earned it in the NFLPA survey. The culture thing doesn't mean much to you guys, but it means a lot to them and that sort of thing. And I think if you were an NFL player, you'd want to be coached by someone like Kevin O'Connell. And there's a lot to be said for teams can fight through a lot if they're playing for their coach and they believe in their culture and all that sort of stuff. Okay. So all that to be said. But I also think that when it comes to you're in that position and you make the bet that you make, and you're the quarterback guy, so you are the number one guy in terms of that decision, and you're putting it on you to develop the quarterback, that we tie you two together. And McCarthy's success will be tied to Kevin O'Connell and his success going forward and the way that he's viewed. I don't think there's any doubt about that unless a Brock Purdy situation should come about, and then you get the Kyle Shanahan treatment. And you are right that when you look at all of those coaches from 2022 that got fired, what do they have in common is that there's very few franchise quarterbacks that those guys had. The incoming class of 2022. McDaniels gets Jimmy Garoppolo for the Raiders, and he's fired pretty quickly. And, Trevor Lawrence is he going to melt down this year and get another coach fired? How many coaches need to be fired because Trevor Lawrence isn't that great? And, Brian Daboll with Daniel Jones, and he didn't have the supporting cast like he has now. And I also don't think Daniel Jones is going to continue to play all this well that he's played so far with the Colts. But still, maybe you could look at that one and say, well, they had a quarterback and they let it get away. That might be fair for Daboll. But for the most part, the coaches who are either on the hot seat or fired from the 2022 class, most of them didn't have franchise quarterbacks. Now, that also, it's not like he didn't have anybody. Darnold is clearly very good. Kirk was very good. So it's not like he had nobody at the quarterback position, just not a franchise quarterback to work with. And that's why they pick McCarthy. But things like that don't happen immediately. And when they haven't had either of those two guys in, they haven't had anywhere near the success. They're a below 500 team when anybody else plays. And they're a 66% win percentage team when those guys play. Marauder, the Vikings have a high drop rate. How is that JJ's fault? Well, do they have a high drop rate as a team? I don't know if they actually do. I'm not sure. I guess I'd have to find that stat. I don't know where to find that stat. Is there a PFF? Who's got the most drops? I guess I could look how many. Let's see. Maybe I could find this. Well, also catch it, like how catchable your ball is a thing. That doesn't come from me. That comes from Kurt Warner when I did my article on him. And he talked about catchable ball. But let's see. How many drops do they have this year? As a team, they have 13 as a team. How many did they have last year? Last year, they had 19. So they are on pace to have more than last year. How many do they have in 2023? Drops seem like an up. They had 30. Wow. 30 in 2023. What does that correlate with? Not having your starting quarterback. Interesting. But so not as many drops as 2023, more per game than last year. 13 doesn't seem like a super high number to me. They've had some notable ones though. They have had some notable ones. And the Jefferson one is a bad one, and it changes everything. But also, this is what happens when your quarterback's not playing that great, is that we obsess over one or two plays. With great quarterbacks, if there's a mistake that gets made, there's, okay, that next play. That was a big one, though. It was. Two Dog Dad says McCarthy looks like he rarely gets to his second read. And leads with his eyes and not his feet. I don't know, just spitballing. Well, isn't that what we're all doing? Two Dog Dad is we're just all spitballing when it comes to this. I think he wants to get to his first place to go with the ball and sometimes doesn't get there on time. I think that does happen. But he does look like he is trying to go through reads. It's just I feel like I'm out of my depth if I say he's supposed to go here to 1, 2, and 3. Like I'm not JT O'Sullivan terms of breaking down the film. Lori, Lory, says, do you see any difference in JJ's training camp performance versus the last 4 games that he played in? I understand one practice or another is not a real game. Well, that's the biggest thing is that in training camp, yeah, we saw a lot of the high stuff that you see. We saw the arm strength. We saw the velocity. We saw balls fly 10 feet over receivers. So that did happen at times. Where the biggest difference is that you don't have in practice a situation like you ran into against the Ravens. You cannot simulate it. You cannot simulate you're down 2 scores in the third quarter at home. You've jumped off sides 5 times, and your number one receiver has dropped a touchdown pass and is clearly not happy. And there's 70,000 people staring at you going, WTF, man, get it together, right? We all paid way more money than we should have to come see you, and now you're letting us down. And like there's coaches that are trying to yell instructions to you, and the other team is apparently shouting out things at the line of scrimmage, and all your teammates are looking at you to make a play. Like you can't simulate that. You can't simulate a QB hit early in the game where he gets smacked or something, which may throw him off, or hitting your hand on a helmet because there's a pass rush. Like there's things in real games can't be simulated. So we can only, from practice, we can only take away a lot of the raw tool stuff as opposed to the stuff that is going to matter when the game is the game. And that's why they call guys gamers sometimes, because maybe in practice you can't always tell everything that they can do, but they get into a game and it's like, okay, they're going to manage that whole situation. Nicholas says, how much has the O-line and CJ Ham injuries messed up the run game? Well, I think that in the past of this season it has, but not the last game. And Ham being back, they should be able to do whatever they want to do. They were using big personnel. The run game was unsuccessful a little bit early on and then got better as it went along. They can run now. I think they've got, especially if they get Oliver back, they should be able to run. This is a game where it's a test case, because I don't think that Kevin O'Connell should be reading every internet post that says, bro, you need to run more, or listening to every podcast telling him to run more. However, you have the Chicago Bears, whose defense is not special and who I believe you can run successfully against with almost the full offensive line. Ham, if Oliver comes back, you got everything you need. Mason, Jones looks really good. This would be a situation where, and it's funny because I defend the pass first. It's the philosophy. They're going to keep doing it. But in this case, you really should be able to run the ball and lead with the run. Absolutely should be able to do that this week. And with the current circumstances, I think previously, before the Ravens game, there was plausible deniability for that. And they did run a lot in the game. They were up by 30. But against Cincinnati, but to not see it in certain circumstances last week, see it completely disappear. That's where you have a good enough run game to be able to lead on that. Marauder doing the same thing 20 times in a row, even if it's to Jefferson, fails every time. Does it? Justin Jefferson, what did he do last year? 1,533 yards and 10 touchdowns. 68.7% completion percentage on throws his way. Does it? 2022, 1,809 yards, 14 yards a catch, 8 touchdowns. In those seasons, they won 27 total regular season games. I don't know, man. I think that offense that's built around the best receiver in the world is probably like a good idea. I mean, I just don't know what else. Like this is you're just hoping and hunting and looking for anything, just grasping at any straw. When the answer is probably the simplest one, is that he needs more time to develop, and it wasn't a great game. If we're saying now all of a sudden it's wrong to throw to the top wide receiver, then I guess you need to go back to your Mike Zimmer era where they didn't want to do it enough. And, Zimmer would argue with the offensive coordinator who wanted to do it enough. I mean, that's the trouble too. Like if you absolutely refuse to place any blame on the guy throwing the football, it really doesn't hold up very well when we have such a sample size of other guys throwing the same football to the same receivers. That's the trouble. it's okay to say he was really inaccurate in one game and without saying, and the same goes for the Atlanta game. Like, it went bad and it was a million excuses and some explanations and all that stuff. It doesn't have to mean it's over. It just means that night it did not go the way it was supposed to go for him. So are you saying this is a kick-ass offense because it seems like that lately? Well, what I'm saying is that it certainly kicked a lot of ass last year. I mean, I don't know how many other ways to say it. If this was Kevin O'Connell's first year coaching football and this was how it looked, I think we would be saying, yeah, what is going on here? It'd be like a Shane Waldron type of discussion. But we have a sample size. We have things to work with, like Justin Jefferson being the offensive player of the year. So all of a sudden it's, oh, no. Everybody's wrong except for JJ. Well, that doesn't quite seem to add up. Steven, what about Grenard's availability? I don't know. KOC said maybe, and that's the best we could do on that. He's been the designated chaser-arounder of Caleb Williams. Brett, thank you so much for the enormous super chat. Again, not something you have to do, but really, really greatly appreciate that. Brett says the key for JJ bouncing is to slow down, I assume you mean bouncing back, and trust his footwork and mechanics as the game progresses. His first quarters are great. Yep, that's when he's also within the first 15 plays that they've practiced. Boogie says, what about JJ's throwing motion do you not like? Well, there's a couple things that I don't like, and this is when it gets bad, because Brett's point is exactly right. He comes out in the plays that he's comfortable with, and then his throwing motion looks much better to me. The stride gets too long, and you can do this in your house if you like. If you have your stride get too long, where does my shoulder go? Goes up. You want your shoulder, so golfers know this. When you hit the ball, if you're a good golfer, you know this. Your left shoulder does not go up in the air. Your left shoulder goes toward the target, and then the club comes up behind, right? It's the same thing for throwing a football. And the reason that I'm not a quarterback, but I feel pretty confident in this is I've seen them throw well. With Darnold and Bradford, watched a lot of these guys throw the ball. And Kirk had some good things about his throwing motion. But I think Kirk wasn't as physically built as these other guys. Bradford, not a top draft pick for a reason. So his throwing motion was different. But Bradford's the best throw I've ever seen. And Bradford had a pretty compact windup. He didn't bring the ball way down. And this is another problem too. When you overstride, the ball comes down. And with the ball coming down, so does your head. And if you wanted to throw the ball from me to you, would you move your head around and throw it? Or would you stare right at your target and throw it? If you've ever seen dart throwers, what do? Great NBA shooters, what do? Baseball hitters, you can draw a box around baseball hitters' heads. They do not move out of that box. So what you want to focus on with McCarthy when you're watching is the more times that his head stays steady and on a flat level, and he's throwing really from driving from the back foot, not in a stride, but more of a turn. And these are all the best throws that he's made this year are like this. Then that's what they're trying. And this is also listening to KOC and what they want too. But that's how he's looking to do it. And he has. But as he had said, bad habits start to come about when you get in those kind of panic situations. And that's where Brett's exactly right. So Joshua says, you know what's coming, cliche crap excuses for losing. Well, I mean, what happens when they lose is never anything anybody wants. I've seen every different approach to it. Aaron Glenn's yelling at the media over injuries. You've seen coaches who are sort of sad about losing at the podium. There's coaches that have wordy explanations about losing at the podium. No, but 100% of the time it's not taken well by the public. You know why? Because they're losing. That's exactly why. So no matter what anybody says about it, you got to win. Jay says we have zero time for development. Well, I mean, no, I don't think it's zero time. But if they're going to make the playoffs this year, then I suppose that's true. I mean, I think that when it comes to development, the way they set up the timeline and where McCarthy was supposed to peak was probably 2026, because they didn't know, just like you didn't know and I didn't know exactly what was going to come this year. I do think that they felt that it would be farther along than this. There's no doubt about that. You don't spend like this unless you would think that. You would have played it conservatively this offseason, and then next offseason is where you would have gone crazy if you didn't think that this was going to be any good or that McCarthy wasn't going to be anywhere close. So, I in general feel where you're coming from when you say that. Like, you don't have time. But I don't think that you have to look at 4 games and say, well, we've got our answer on to the next quarterback. So you do have time the rest of this season for development and then into next offseason. But then you're probably right that like that's where it's going to make or break. This year is probably not the make or break. Matt says 6-6 and run through the bad teams, probably still need a win in the division. Wild card will be tough. Yep. But if they got to 9-8 and even lost the wild card, that would be pretty impressive. Last Samurai sounds like something I was describing earlier. Says the Ponder comparisons are crazy. People have to chill. Yeah, no, I agree with that. There was a serious lack of confidence from Ponder that I don't think that McCarthy has. Let's see. Can we simulate the rest of the season and see if this team has secret superstars? Yeah, I mean, I'd love to simulate at least a few weeks to know a little bit better about where they're at with McCarthy and the playoff race and everything else. But I also enjoy the journey. I know that it's excruciating for some of you. So, but I mean, I'm planning to go to Lambeau, so I'm excited about that. Planning this weekend. Excited about that. Brian says, thanks for continuing level-headed coverage. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, Brian. But on a Wednesday it is. Sunday after the game, I can't make any guarantees. What are you most looking forward to for the rest of this season? Well, I mean, the number one is just, I'm looking for answers as much as you are on the quarterback situation. And it really depends on how these next 2 weeks go, because I mean, like I said, I'm looking forward to going to Lambeau Field. It's always one of my favorite trips of the year. It's honestly, I know it makes you sick to hear the Packers talk about their history and the majesty and all that stuff, but it is. If you're a Vikings fan who's driven down there, you know all about it. You know how unique and special that is in sports, in a sports world where they're trying to dome everything. Lambeau's pretty cool. I mean, I think one of the tough things about this team is that when we talk about like looking forward to stuff, there's just not a lot that they've given you to say, oh, I'm really looking forward to the development of this guy or what this guy becomes, because we mostly know what every guy is. Jalen Redmond's had an amazing season, but is there 3 other players where you're like, can't wait to see? I mean, I'm interested in where Dallas Turner takes this. Donovan Jackson and his continued progress. But really, I mean, I'm interested to see if they give us all a reason to think that they can make the playoffs, to care about those games at the end of the year, for those to mean something. I expect that they will, but I just don't know because it's a lot harder to shape expectations when you're still trying to figure out, can the quarterback play on a weekly basis? But if they give us a reason to show up at the stadium on Christmas Day, if they give us a reason for that next week to matter, that would be very exciting, I think, for everybody. That means it's gone really well. So if they get to that point, then something really good has happened. If they don't, and those last 2 games are just kind of bleh, then there ain't much to be too thrilled about at that point. So let's see. Okay, so probably need to call it a wrap if I'm going to get my writing done for the day. Got a couple of fun articles on the way, which you can check out over at purpleinsider.football. One thing I'm working on is quarterbacks under center. I had a great conversation with Blake Cashman, Kevin O'Connell. Maybe some of you heard answer my question. So I've got something on that. And also was talking to some players today about how the kick return is helping them develop as young players. Boogie says if we had Kyle Shanahan, we'd be 6-3. Could be. He's a great coach. I don't disagree with that. Kyle Shanahan, I think, is probably the best at what you guys are talking about. Whatever the in-between is, the extreme passing offense, the extreme rushing offense, where you just have this balance and it's right there for the quarterback to play. Of course, y'all need to keep in mind, if you're touting Kyle Shanahan, that he drafted Trey Lance and ended up playing a 7th round draft pick instead. So nobody is really a quarterback whisperer. And that was part of my article, even talking about how Bill Walsh spent a first round, the GOAT quarterback teacher spent a first round draft pick on Jim Druckenmiller, who started one game in his career. So nobody has the magic wand. Nobody has the ability to, what did I say? Go to Russia and strap wolves to the quarterback or something and have them run up a mountain. That's not how it works. And experience is usually the best teacher. And that's what JJ McCarthy is going to get as long as his hand heals. And we'll keep track of that as always. So don't forget, if you haven't, in the comments section, if you're rewatching, answer that FanDuel question of the day, which is JJ McCarthy's over-under for this game on FanDuel is 214.5. What is your one key to a McCarthy bounce back? So thanks everybody for watching / listening. Sorry about there's a little bit early on in the video, a little bit of dropped frames. Hopefully that worked itself out after a while, and I'll blame Aurora Borealis for that, I guess. I don't know. Maybe a little internet glitchiness, but I think we were good most of the show. So thanks everybody again for watching / listening, and we will see you, tomorrow night. See you then. Manny will be back to pick the schedule. That should be pretty fun. So we'll catch you then.